What is up, guys? Welcome back. Light Warriors Unleashed podcast, episode 54. Where have we been? What's been going on? I can't even believe we got to episode 54. This is like amazing in my field. Like, I just hold this and feel this and see this. And this is so juicy in the energy of all of this. And I am just so grateful that you guys are here. And we are consistently expanding. The guests coming on are bringing in different edges, different energies, different embodiments. And Kathleen Kennedy is also part of that collective of energy. So, from PR background, from working in newsrooms and literally no longer listening to the news, she brings in this whole new landscape from the education system. She is a consultant in that world. She is versed in the communication, has seen a lot of things going down in the school system, especially in Oklahoma, where she lives and where she's worked. But it's an interesting conversation. We talk about the dynamics of what's happening in the school systems now, what has been transpiring for years, the mechanism of some of the educators and what they're underneath and what's happening in that field. But we also talk about some juicy stuff like soul alignment and listening to the calling and stepping into the space and courage and owning the boldness that is needed to protect these kids, to step in, to speak the truth, to not just let these tall buildings, is what she called them, keep you conformed and in that alignment that they're dictating all the moves. How do we actually change this in the world and help support these people, these dreamers, these visionaries, these children, especially in the world? So I love this conversation. I'm so grateful for Kathleen being in my life. Like, I got to be a part of a masterclass series back in June that she moved into the world to help educators. And I'm just all in for this movement. So I am so grateful for this. So no further ado, Kathleen Kennedy, episode 54, Light Warriors Unleashed podcast. Kathleen, I am so excited to have you back in my world. We got connected, like, I don't know, it was about a month or two ago. And when you were launching, and moving through this mechanism for educators, which I know you're going to probably touch on in this conversation, but like, I'm just so grateful that we're back together in this space to serve in some way, shape, or form.
I love it. Like, I love how the world goes around and gives back to one another. And I'm so appreciative for you, like, having me on your show. Like, it's so exciting. And I get to see Costa Rica through your window again.
Yes. Welcome to Saturdays every day.
I love it. I know. It's so good. So good.
So funny. Like, I got to be a guest on Kathleen's masterclass series that she put out for educators. And that's what we're going to lean into today. The school system, what's happening in the US, because she's in the US, which will trickle into other countries. I'm sure there'll be a dynamic of things happening in the world that are showing up this way. And I think where we want to start is like your story within this. Like, give us kind of like, how did you get into this world? Where did it lead you? And I'll keep moving the baton through it as we kind of
Yeah,
endeavor, we'll say.
I love it. So I started out with dreams and aspirations of being a famous journalist. Like, I went to school, got my degree in journalism. I have the perfect broadcast name, if you ask me. Like, it's like,
Kathleen
hey, I'm
Kennedy.
Kathleen Kennedy, and tonight's news, whatever. And I'm like, I had an NPR show in college. It was super fun, loved it. And then I got out in the real world and worked in a television station, and I felt like the life was just being sucked out of me. So I was like, well, that's not fulfilling my soul and my mission in life, right? Like, it was just awful. And I knew early on that that was not for me. So I think I was there. I maxed out at like 2.5 years. And then done. Yeah. I was like, okay. So I went into nonprofit, which is a great transition for me to like serve and be in a space where I thought I was doing something that served a purpose and served others outside of myself.
Yeah.
And so because of my background, though, when we got to work, I was like asked to help do some of the communication pieces when there were massive disasters. I live in Oklahoma, and we have tornadoes that frequently come through here.
Yeah, that's a thing, right?
Yeah, that's a thing. And so I was on the front line doing some communication, and then I was also engaged in leadership from an early age. I was always fascinated with leadership in in work and connections and meeting people. And so one of those connections I had, she's like, you'd be great in school PR and communication. I was like, what's that? You mean like putting a button on someone so they can promote your school and like wear your name? And they're like, no, no. And it goes a little deeper than that, and I was like, okay, that sounds like fun. Sure. And my first day of my first school PR job, we fired a teacher. And I was like, oh, this is going to be so good.
Let's get into this right out of the gate,
I know. Well, my superintendent was like, we're going to baptize you with fire today. And I was like, oh God, okay. And the story behind that was this teacher, knew that one of her kids brought brownies to school that had pot in them and served them to all of their classmates.
Yeah, she did. I love it.
She did. But then, so her kids were required to go to get jobs in their health career industries. Well, they test you when you go in to those fields and work, and they're checking your drug levels in your body. And this kid goes, I'm gonna fail. And the teacher's like, meet me in this parking lot down here, and I will give you this packet of stuff that you pour in your drink and it'll flush your system. Well, that doesn't work. Like, those don't exist. And this kid failed his drug test at the job, right? So then he comes back to the administration and tells the administration what happened. And of course, then that teacher was let go for her participation in that events because it's totally unethical.
Even to hand a child like a packet of something to take. Are you kidding? Like, I don't even understand.
I know. And that was my first day on the job. And I was like, this is going to be great. So that was 23 years ago.
Wow.
And I mean, I literally was like, oh, this is awesome. So I stayed in that first job for 7 years and then recruited out for a hot second. And then I got called to consult for a school district in Oklahoma City. And it's a large urban school district with about 46,000 students. And I can't remember how many employees. I want to say we had like 7,000 or 8,000 employees at the time, maybe 10. And it's high poverty, lots of challenges and stuff. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to stay here very long. This is going to be awful, whatever. And the superintendent transitioned into somebody that I adored. Like, he was one of the best leaders I'd ever worked for. And I stayed on full time for 7 years. And I was fired. I was like, oh my God. So he retired, and in schools in major urban districts and sometimes just locally, like in your smaller districts, if there's enough politics shaking the leadership, they don't want certain people around anymore. And so they cut the entire leadership team after he retired. And I was on that team, and I'm like devastated because I was like, oh shit, what am I going to do? Like, I was going to retire in that job. I loved it so much. I loved the people we served and the mission and the calling. And it was like, these are my people, and this is what I'm meant to do. Like, I knew that in my soul. And I was just, and I was a single
about
mom.
this. Yeah, I got a question about this. So why do you think they fired and canceled out all the leadership? Like, what were you guys actually doing in the landscape that created that decision? I think there's an important piece in that.
Oh yeah. Well, so we didn't do it in the business standards world. Like you have, so I like to liken it to the fact that the tall buildings around us wanted to have things done their way, and they're used to getting their way because they drive the tall buildings that are making lots of multi-million dollars worth of decisions, right? Well, and a lot of urban schools are not successful because the high rate of turnover in leadership. Ding, ding, ding. Because they're like, oh, we don't want you here anymore. We're going to make things so difficult. We're not going to let you do your job. We want it done our way. And if you don't do it our way, here's the highway, right? Like, so my superintendent actually came to me, and 5 years is a long stint in an urban school district. And so he came to me one day, and I said, you look exhausted. Like he would come in, we'd have a lot of closed door discussions because that's what you're in a counseling role in that position. And I said, you need to go on vacation, which he was headed to Hawaii for a couple of weeks. And I said, go there and like come back with this spirit of enthusiasm and joy and get back to work. And let's take care of business, like take care of those tall businesses and show them who's boss.
Yeah.
Or you need to retire. So he walks back in after his 2-week vacation. He looks fantastic, right? And I was like, yeah, let's go. And he goes, I took your advice. I'm going to retire. And I was like, what? Yeah. And then you're like, oh man. And so they loosened. So they're talking about the politics. The governor of our state, like just totally waived the superintendent requirements for the superintendent that was going to come in and be the interim. So he was an interim with no qualifications, zero, no idea of how to run a school district. Not one single thing. And it was interesting because like in retrospect, I've heard a lot of things about the politics on the other side is there's lots of interests and lots of players and they don't see the things that are going on. Like I like to say under the surface is, and for in that under the surface, man, I was as the leader of the communications team. Some days I had 6, 7, 8 crises going on in one time. Like I was like, we got, and they're happening and I'm keeping them below the surface. And that is a good place for them to be. But I didn't have time to pop up, and go, oh, let's do all the fun, flowery, like promotional type things that all these community partners want us to do and be active in. There just weren't enough resources to take care of that stuff. Like they don't match your dollars don't match. And so I think those people are like, well, she's not a team player in the community. You're right, because you don't know what's going on under the surface. And actually somebody commented to me afterwards. They're like, holy moly, we heard about and learned about all the things that you were doing after the fact, after you left. And I was like, yeah, I mean, it's insane how much we are juggling. And every leader was doing the same thing in their own department. And so that politics were driving it, even because they didn't like what was happening on the surface, but you have to take care of what's not showing because that drives what happens up above.
Yeah. And this is a potent thing too, to understand. Like I think there's a lot of stuff that we are not seeing that is happening in the school systems and the governmental systems and this mechanism.
It's in your own life too. Like it's a metaphor for our life and how we, like, you could look at social media for any single person and you're like, wow, you show us like heads up, all the best, like smiley face, whatever. But what's going on underneath the water is you're treading and sometimes you might be sinking, right? Like we don't know what we don't know, right? So we get to do a better job of asking questions.
Yeah, so true. I want to get your opinion on what's happening now in the school systems, but let's keep on the pathway of so you got fired. Yeah,
I'm single mom, by the way.
Single mom, knees cut off, down like fuck, like what the hell is gonna happen? So what happened? Like what shifted for you? What moved?
Oh man. So then you have to know that I was raised with a dad who was like militant almost, like, like no excuses. Take whatever job comes your way. And I'm like, so I'm applying for jobs and I'm like, I simply cannot work. I actually had an interview with I think it was a water company or electric company in West Virginia. They flew me out there and then I was like, oof, this would be a miserable existence. And so I, for somebody it might fulfill them. For me, I was like, it'll suck the life out of me.
We don't want any life sucking out of us.
No. And I was like, I can't do this. And so I threw the interview. Like I knew how to do the interview, but I purposely threw the writing part. Like they wanted me to take a test and I was like, meh, like, oh no, I'm not doing that. And so I threw it. I knew I threw it. And I went back home and I was like, and so I'm like, what am I going to do? And I like, there are 560 school districts in Oklahoma, or at least there were back when I started in 2014. And I'm like, only about 20 of them, and not including the technology centers, had a full-time communication person or team working on their staff. I mean, that was less than 20. Now there's probably about 40 that have them full-time, right? Like, or maybe 35. I mean, it's still very low. But I was like, oh, there is a need for what I do and what I did in the school, in the larger urban school district, to do on my own. And so I was like, that's the birth of my idea. But in order to make it work, I mean, I didn't have money. Like, I didn't have anything coming in. So I was like, suck up your pride. You got to take whatever resources you can get. And I took in food stamps from, the US government that's available. You can apply for it. And I told her daycare, and they put me on it was a daycare, like, where you could drop down into a lower income bracket or whatever. And I was like, great. So I met that standard too. And I did what it took to get it out there. And I used some of those, like, resources, people that I knew and met, connections and stuff, and just like went out there and went full force. Like, I'm like, hey, here I am. This is what I offer. And just started reaching out to people on the phone and in emails, and
whatever it took.
That was it. Yeah. Whatever it took.
Yeah. So let's, before like I dive into all the dynamics of the conversation of outside this, let's fast forward to today. So today you now consult in this, like, tell us what you do today.
Oh my God. I love how the transformations happened over the years and stuff. So successfully, I went from offering like ad hoc services, which is, you use me when you need me, and I'll customize it. Well, that doesn't provide a stable income. And I'm like, oh, I need to stabilize it. So at a point, then I was like, oh, here's my retainer contract for my big clients, right? So I offered, 10 to 15 hours, 15 to 20 per month, whatever, at a certain price point. And it provided stable sources of income, which was significant. Then I grow so big that I've got to bring someone on full time. And during that transition, I was going through a transformational leadership program that was a worldwide program. And I started learning deeper things about myself, and then also more about how I can serve. And so I was like, oh, I need to give back, and I need to go deeper, because what I end up doing is counseling and coaching superintendents and administrative leaders in their positions where they're at, so that they can become better communicators. But what if I started with educators and coached them for positions they want to move into in the future? So I opened up a coaching line to coach educators. I'm starting a podcast on all things school communications that like are tips and tricks, and I'm interviewing fun guests, and we're keeping it super short because I just feel like people have short attention spans anymore.
They do.
So that's fun. And then but I ran for school board, which was crazy here in our local community, and people were so mean that I was like, oh, I'm going to also create a masterclass leadership series where I give back free resources to educators, like connecting them with you, like you were on, and laughter yoga, like all the, like these amazing resources that can be life-changing for them, because they're really going through it. Like they're, I feel like some of their joy has been sucked out and stuff. And so the way I'm diversifying myself is not something I envisioned when I started in 2014, but now it's something that I can't unsee. And now it's like, where else do I get to serve? Like I'm constantly looking for ways to level up how I can serve people.
Yeah. And this is awesome. And I love this. And I love the light that you just brought into play of like what's happening for our educators in these systems right now. And I feel like a really big distortion started moving through the collective over the last 3 years that we've seen, right? With all the COVID stuff and all the dynamics of what happened with COVID. But I think this has been happening before that we didn't see, like you talk about like not seeing it underground, right? And us being chained to certain curriculums that may not make sense anymore, or like different dynamics of that. So like, what are we dealing with right now? Like these educators are dealing with a governmental system of these big buildings that are holding a place that says, we want you to do it this way, but they got into their jobs for the passion of helping the kids. And it's not even coming together any longer, I don't feel like. So tell me what this looks like. Yeah.
And interesting too, because I always like to say this. I am not an educator. I didn't come from an education background, but I am passionate about making sure that everyone has access to it because that's your fundamental right in the US.
Yeah.
And I believe a lot of people in other countries where it's not a right, they are wanting that and craving that. And so like continuing to give this gift to people is crucial for me. Like it's a lifeblood. But we're like in some cases stabbing ourselves in the back, like it's like,
Yeah.
oh God. And
Yeah.
but here's what I learned on the campaign trail. A lot of it I learned
Mm.
when I was campaigning. You have the far right and the far left of the political system in the United States,
Yeah.
right? And they are arguing and they are loud and they are mean and they are crazy advocates. But
Yeah.
they're tiny. They're like a 5% over here and like a 5% over here. And the rest of us in the middle are like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Right?
can
Like,
imagine.
but
Yeah.
so what we've done is not just say that, but I've tuned them out. Like, I don't watch the news anymore. It is
Yeah.
not healthy. When I
No.
was running, this was so funny. Like, one of the people I met were like, you don't watch Fox News? Like, I don't watch any news.
Yeah.
I don't subject myself to the negativity because you're going to get one side over here and you're going to get one side over here.
Yeah.
And somewhere in the middle is the truth, right?
Yeah.
Like it is how we work together, how we play together, how we live together. And your agenda is never going to be adopted by the agenda over here. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? But if we can align the people that are in the middle that are starting to drown out the noise and stuff
Yeah.
and get them to speak up, like
Yeah.
that's where I feel like the gift is. And
Yeah.
educators are caught in that middle.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's like being that when I started out with saying, I'm not an educator, but guess what? They're trained. They have the calling and the resources and the pedagogy. They went to school to learn this. And what it is it's debilitating and it's crippling and it's like a total disrespect for the profession. When
Yeah.
people in the buildings or whomever, the politics say,
Yeah.
you're not qualified to do that, and they start questioning your abilities,
Mm.
and they're having it's that loud voices though, and it's like, shut up and leave me alone to do my job, right? Like
Yeah.
if you would just let us do our jobs.
Yeah.
I think too and of course this is political and divided or whatever, but releasing some of the regulations, federal regulations, and kind of letting us have flexibility back, a little bit more
Mhm.
flexibility to drive those decision making abilities so that we can provide a more robust curriculum that isn't married to old school. And I walk into classrooms all the time that people say, oh, it's not new. Well, they are being pretty creative now.
Yeah. I can imagine that. And I think that it goes both ways too. Like do you actually think the system's going in the right direction or do you think that we're like off kilter right now?
Hmm. It depends on where you are.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
I
Yeah.
I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, and I've been in enough buildings to know, I can walk in a building and I can tell you if it's a good leader or a bad leader. And
Mm.
leadership carries down, right?
Yeah,
Like
of course.
it is top down, and in the structure of the system, it's the the board of education or the trustees, and then the superintendent or the CEO, whatever you call them, wherever you are.
Yeah.
And then you have like district leaders or building leaders, and then it falls down. So if the leadership at the top is
Yeah.
terrible, it usually falls into the building as well. But especially at the building level, like
Mm.
principals and stuff, if you've got principal or if your kids are out of control, teachers are out of control, that principal is missing in action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
MIA. And do you feel
Uh-huh.
like there's a lot because well, we're seeing a lot of distortion moving through the field right now with some of the things that are dropping into the school system that have never been there before, but now are being adopted into. Do you feel like that is there a way around this as the principal and the teachers and the educators? Can they fight this movement? Or like is this something that they're like a lot of them aren't speaking up, I know, because their jobs and the family unit and all that kind of dynamic, but like what do you feel about this like vibration moving through this school system that is it's a distortion, really it is like the dynamics of some of the stuff they're bringing up in schools that never been there before in our whole entire.
You mean like banning books and not teaching certain curriculum, which is
Yeah.
happening right here in Oklahoma?
Yeah. Or even like the whole like gender dynamics of
Oh,
things
right.
and
Yeah, for
all of
sure.
that stuff.
There's all
Like,
kinds of stuff. Yeah.
yeah.
So, um, it's interesting to me to look at that and you're like, this is a really cool way to look at it too. So one of the organizations I belong to is a national school PR organization. I've been a member for 23 years.
Yeah. Makes sense.
And I routinely like to judge
Mm.
different entries for different awards because it allows me to see what's going on and the programming people are putting
Yes.
together that are creative, mind-blowing and stuff. And one of them responded to this is just in this last school year,
Yeah.
responded to the book banning in their
Mm.
community. And it was like all these crazy people came to their board meeting, loud, 200 people. It was nuts,
Yeah.
all the things. And so you're kind of backed up to a wall at that point. You've got to take some action when people are causing a stir like that, even though if it doesn't resonate with your entire community. But I want to say this because
Yeah.
it's so funny how it ended up.
Hmm.
So those loud voices are there. They create like a committee to review books and things like that. And then they come up with a way to execute like a process that you can do. And parents now have the option to opt their child out of a book if they don't like it.
Mm. Okay.
And they can have them read something else.
Yeah.
They instituted that and not one single person opted their kids out. Oh my God. So here's the lesson on that. Most people don't give a shit about book
Yes.
banning.
Yeah.
There
They
is
don't.
a single silent, not even silent. There's just like a real small percentage of a loud voice
Yeah.
that cares.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to it, when it's brass tacks, right? They
Yeah.
don't give a shit. They are not
Interesting.
opting their kids out of books.
Yeah. And do they actually even have kids? Like maybe they were just the voices in the
Oh, that's
background wanting
also
to,
true. That's
yeah,
also true. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
wanting to be
Now,
heard.
there's some groups that are tractioning and making waves in certain states. They're making waves here, but
Yeah.
that's not to be
Yeah.
like we're one of the conservative states. Like our
Yeah.
state was like all red,
I was going to
like
ask you too, like what, who's in leadership in Oklahoma? Like I was going to ask you the political party. So that makes a lot of sense. Okay.
yeah. Yeah. So, and I'm going to say like I vote for the person, not
Yeah.
the party.
Agreed.
And I think there's also a disconnect there too, because some of the party on the red side and red and blue and, are
Yeah.
divisive in itself. I'm like, I'm purple.
Yeah.
I'm a collective of both. I'm purple. I
Yeah.
also said, I'm also gray. Like you
Yeah.
don't put me in black and white. I'm gray. I see both,
Yeah.
and I think that's a better place to be
Hmm.
because then you're making informed decisions about there's definitely parts that are right on each side. So the book banning piece is that there was pornography in schools,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Well, there's disagreements on to what degree of pornography.
Yeah.
But as a mom of an 11-year-old, do I want my child reading about sex in 6th grade? No,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
It's not a place for it.
Yeah.
If I want to teach her about it, I want to teach her about it.
Yeah.
But maybe that's the book that I want to like opt out of once she's in high school or whatever. But
Yeah.
like there's not really a need to talk about sex in schools. Like, they're just
Well,
not
all
not
of
in that.
this.
Not when they're
Yeah.
depicting like, and I would say, because people are like, oh, is it really there? Well, I have a friend in another school district across the country in Georgia.
Yeah.
I think it's Georgia. And she posted a pictures of the content of the book. It was like a graphic novel. And I was
Yeah.
like, not acceptable on any level. Should that
Yeah.
be in our book? And like if you want your kid to read it at home on your own, great. It
Totally
shouldn't
different.
be in a public library, in
Yeah.
a school library. Maybe
Yeah.
public's fine, but I don't want my child to do that one either. Like
Yeah.
11 is too young. And it's also your parent decision on when you want to talk to them about sex. I get that. But as far as like the original books, like, the Great Gatsby or whatever they're talking
Yeah.
about, like, I don't even know because I don't read the list of books that are banned.
Yeah. Well, and
But the
yeah.
classics, like, I think
Yeah.
there's other lessons in there that were taught that were way more above what we're supposed to be focusing on. I think people are bringing the wrong attention to certain parts of those classic books.
Yeah. And I agree with you about that in the landscape of it. Because if we aren't shining a light on the dynamic of, let's say, the kissing scene, but we're shining the dynamic on the revolution and taking action or whatever it is, like, I
Uh-huh.
just like, I just feel like the messaging is getting lost. Like, we're forgetting what this actually is. Like, why did we start going to school in the 1950s in the first place? Like, like, what was school about then? Right. And it
Mm-hmm.
was like, and we've lost, I think, this. And I think
Mm-hmm.
some of the teachers, and we've talked about this before, lost their light in this mechanism, and they've forgotten too who they really are and why they started teaching in the first place. And they're
Mm-hmm.
allowing almost this to move through where some of these students need their teachers to step up and to help them. Like, it's their
Yeah.
teachers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so funny too, like it's the new age or whatever. And I've gone to a couple of different presentations about how AI is helping teachers, and
Mm.
then you've got the scary part that you see, right? Like, oh
Yeah.
God, it could create, your livelihood and
Yeah.
take it away or whatever. But in a classroom instruction piece, if you allow that to come in, you could create a lesson plan for Colleen, a lesson plan for Kathleen, a lesson plan for John and Brandon, and who all have different learning styles, but we all
Mm.
need to learn the same content and subject matter, right?
Yeah.
But
Yep.
it reaches each of us in our own learning capacity. So Chat GPT and AI has
Yeah.
the capacity to take one lesson and specialize it into each different person's learning styles. It's so cool. Like,
Which
if
is
you use it,
powerful. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right? Like, those are ways to quickly take what you've been working on and make it adaptable to fit everybody's individual needs. And that's what education is moving to, in my opinion. Like,
Yeah.
people are expecting individualized, like, lessons, and then also you cannot, like, ever forget, it's really about relationships.
Yeah. I was just about
How
to say
many
that.
teachers
Like,
do you
yeah.
remember in your lifetime?
Yeah. A few.
Why do you remember them?
Well, my grade two teacher, for sure. We used to write letters to each other, and she, like, we had an outside relationship outside of that, about outside the classroom. And she used to let me go play in the kindergarten classroom in the afternoons. And then it
Uh-huh.
just became a thing when I was in grade three and grade four. The other teachers just let me. I would leave for the afternoon and go to the kindergarten class and play with the kindergarten students and be there with the
Uh-huh.
kindergarten teacher. Like, who lets a student do that? Apparently, I have a leadership capability to hold a certain stance. My grades were better because of it, because I
I
just was a
love
really good
that.
student. And like, but
Yeah.
she started allowing that to happen and moving that through my field. And then I became, good friends, like as good friends as you can be as a kid with a teacher.
Of course.
But the kindergarten teacher brought like her old high heel shoes and purse to school for me, and she gave them to me. Like, those kinds of things. Like, I was just like that girl, like, that just kind of moved that through. So I remember that time. But there's a couple teachers for sure in high school that made a mark, like, but some of them I don't remember their names, but others I
Or
remember them.
anything that they did for me. Like, so
Yeah.
here's my life summed up, right?
Yeah.
I was not the smartest.
Yeah.
I was not the at the end of the line either. I
Yeah.
was in the middle, and I felt like we were always overlooked. Or I
Mm,
was.
yeah.
I didn't I bet you, like, looking back on teachers, except maybe where I was talking too much in class.
I
Most
love it.
teachers that probably don't even know who I am. Like, have
Yeah.
no clue until I was a junior in high school. And I finally had a
Yeah.
teacher who
Mm,
worked with the kids in the middle and all the ones at the top and the ones at the bottom too. And she believed in us more than we believed in ourselves. And that
mm,
was probably the first time I had a teacher that instilled like this drive in me that I was capable of whatever I set my mind to. And
Yeah.
it was a game changer for me.
Wow. Loved it. Love
Yeah.
that. I just
Yeah.
reminding me of like I should probably reach out. So my teacher in high school, who's also my fast pitch coach, because I played on the fast pitch team,
Oh,
and he taught me so much just as a back catcher. Like he tied my hands behind my back at one point, put me in my full equipment, and just threw balls at my head because I used to blink my eyes when a ball would come close. And it's in that
oh,
second that you have the actual impact to be able to take somebody out on second base. And if you close your eyes, you could lose that chance in the blink.
oh,
So he
wow.
trained me to live and have courage to take the balls and to take the ball, like, so it's like it was almost a lesson that could really, now
Yeah, so
you wouldn't be able to do
not
that
just
this
a
day and
lesson.
age.
Yeah, it
I
is
know.
not just a lesson in softball and in fast pitch, right? Like
Yeah.
it carries on through everything.
Yeah.
Don't
Well,
close
and
your eyes.
he wouldn't be able to do that now. Like he would
Oh,
have
I
probably
know.
gotten sued and fired if
Oh, I am
someone found
sure.
out that he had
Yeah.
tied my hands behind my back and threw balls at my head. But we're friends on Facebook, and I'm like, oh, when I go back, so I think of going back home for Christmas to Winnipeg for a couple weeks. Do I want to go back to Winnipeg in the middle of winter when I live in Costa Rica? Not really, and it takes a day to get there, like a couple
You
of
should host your
planes.
family in Costa Rica.
I've been trying to get them to come, but my brother needs to renew his passport and all the. I'm like, guys, let's get on this, like. But that's a whole other mechanism in the
I
space of
know.
things.
Yeah.
But it's like
Right.
it's just so interesting, like the whole dynamic of it all. But I'm like, I should reach out to him. I should just say, like, his name's Monsieur Beck. Monsieur Beck, like, let's go for a coffee. Would love to see you. Like, what are you up to? Like, do you have
Oh, I
space?
love that.
Yeah.
I go to see when I'm in Dallas because my favorite superintendent moved down to
Okay. Yeah.
Dallas and retired there. The one that I was like, no,
You can't retire based on my
I
suggestions.
know, right? Yeah. Uh, and I just love connecting with him. Do you know what does now? This is what he is such a great leader.
Yeah.
He called to volunteer at a local school that was near him
Yeah.
and didn't tell them what he had done. He just
Yeah.
wanted to volunteer reading, doing math, whatever it is you need him to do.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, you're volunteering. And he's like, oh, no problem. And then he said, do you need because there was a teacher spot opening and they didn't have like a fourth grade math teacher, or maybe it was second grade. I don't remember what year it
Yeah.
was. But he goes, I'll volunteer to do it. She goes, what? And he's like, I don't need money. I
Yeah.
don't need money. And I love children and I love teaching. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh, he's just like a
Yeah.
gift. And I'm like, I strive even now to like be more like him and be like a leader like that. Like it is just giving back and giving of service. And that's really why most teachers are where they're at, right? Like it's a
Yeah.
service, it's a calling on your heart.
Yeah.
And it was just like, oh, and if you're not, you'll quickly weed out even, and I say that, but I'm watching still even more and more now that are leaving because they just can't deal with all of the politics and people telling them how to do their jobs and not believing in their education and the
Yeah.
respect that they bring. So yeah.
And part of my heart is like, can we get them all together to battle this? Like, would it actually make a movement? Like, can we get all these teachers that feel this way, that feel like they're being pushed out, that aren't being able to actually get back into the root of what teaching actually is? And could we create this collaborative movement to change the infrastructure? And some people are like, Colleen, like, da, da. I know the red tape. I know the dynamics. I know who owns the systems. I get it. But what if this one light beam started creating just a small deviation? Yeah.
I, I mean, we've seen it happen
Yeah.
in other things and other
Yeah.
structures where all it takes is that one person who's committed to making it happen and starting
Yeah.
that movement and bringing others on board and moving that. And yes, it can happen.
Yeah.
It can. I
It'll,
totally believe it. I think
yeah.
anything's possible.
I do too. And I know it'll take some work, but if this is like a thing that you're heart centered about and that this moves through you, this is yours to bring to life. We talk about soul mission activation and about like literally our mission on earth. This is yours to do. And we're
Yeah.
at that time that we need to be speaking our truth. We need to be holding our truth. We
Oh
are
yeah.
not meant to diminish ourselves and to conform in the boxes. Like if you're in a
Mhm.
box right now, you are not doing life the way that you're meant to do life. It's time for you to rebel against the box and figure this out, you know? So, yeah.
I love that. And it was like when we first talked, like every day is Saturday, like,
Yeah.
you're living your life. Like it's so cool. Like I love that. And I'm also like in my space of where I know I'm
Mhm.
meant to be. I know there's bigger things ahead, but
Yeah.
it's like I belong where I am and I am fulfilled and I'm passionate and I'm joyful. And why live any other way? Because it's
Yeah.
totally miserable. Like, if you're going to make
Yeah.
your life here on earth count, make it count.
Yes, I agree with you. I have one final question, and then I'll want to pass you the baton to speak to wherever you feel called to speak to. But like, what can someone do if they're a parent, if even if they're not a parent, if they're anybody in this system, around the system, seeing this moving through? What what words of wisdom do you have for them, or like what can they actually do to start to maybe move this forward? Like, what does this look like in this world that we're
Ugh,
moving
wow.
into? Yeah, where do you want to go with that one?
That's wide open.
Wide open spaces.
Right? I think they just played here recently. um, let's see. Well, with one person comes a collection of people. You have to bring others along to make it a movement, right? It's an idea, but in order to make it a movement, you got to bring others along with you.
Yeah.
So it's collecting people along the way and moving them together. And it's not like, so courage comes to mind.
Yes.
And it's like having the courage, stepping out there and risking it. Like
Mhm.
what is the risk of not doing it?
Yeah.
Ooh,
Yeah.
is it bigger than the risk of doing it?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like that's the thing. It's like you got to have that courage to just go for it
Yeah.
and go big. And I think you always learn stuff along the way. And so
Mhm.
and the other piece that we always know about, right, is put yourself with people that are smarter than you, right? Like,
Yeah.
and then you raise your collective smart IQ level, right? You're raising yourself up. And it's like bringing all these great people along,
Mm.
and you're moving yourself, and then it becomes this whole group and collective of people that you want to be with and people want to be with, and then they start seeing it and they come up. I think that's how it always starts, right?
Yeah.
But it just takes that one brave soul to kick it off.
Yes. So true. And I think that the all of this is about bravery and courage. When we see something in the field, whether it's what your kids are bringing home, whether it's what they're talking about, whether it's your neighbor's kids, or whether you're a teacher watching this go down, it's one brave soul lighting one light to help shift some things. And
Absolutely.
I just want to emphasize that and hold that in our hearts today as we move through this. Like, like you matter, and your matters to someone else because that ignites someone else. So, like, really holding that into you. And yeah, Kathleen, what do you like? We've touched on numerous things in this podcast, numerous conversations. It's almost been an hour already, which is crazy that we've been hanging out for that long. I know, right? It's like almost been. So, what do you want to say? Like summarizing, or maybe not summarizing, or anything? Like, really, the baton's yours to speak. I just would love to just find out what's on your heart.
I have a giant poster on my wall. I love looking at every day, or not poster, but framed art. And
Yeah.
it says the world needs who you were made to be. And I
Mm-hmm.
firmly believe that. Like we each have a calling in our heart.
Mm-hmm.
All of us do. We got to listen and then be brave and show up, because people are counting on us. People need us to show up. And I feel like that's educators, like there's always going to be a need to educate people, right? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
not ever going to go away. And for me, it's just like, let's keep giving ourselves. If we live in service to other people, we make the entire planet a better place. And
Yeah.
that's my heart. Like that's where I'm at. And using all the tools, going and researching people that can help you be better. And once you know better, do better, right? Like that's the
Yeah.
piece. Like just do better. So
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm so inspired to keep working on the betterment of
Mhm.
education and helping children like succeed. Like that's what we
Yeah.
want. Everybody. And another thing is like we shouldn't be afraid of competition, right? Like it's
Yeah.
not about competition because when one person wins, we all win. Like everybody gets better.
Yeah.
So,
And
mhm.
that's the thing too. And I think a lot of us have been ingrained about competition, and even in marketing tactics. And as an entrepreneur, it's like,
Yeah.
who's your competition? I'm like, no one. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, I am uniquely my own vibration. Therefore, I'm not in any competition. I am in competition with myself every day of making sure I move the needle or keep expanding or deal with my shit or whatever it is I'm moving through. Competition is an illusion because nobody
Yeah.
is competing against each other. Even if you're like running the race and you're in like a volleyball game, you're not competing against someone else. You're competing against you in your
Mhm.
highest quality of being the best person you can be. It's you. It's not anyone else. It's you. Yeah.
I love that. But it's so funny because I know we're out of time and I'm sorry. Like
Don't say
I used to
sorry.
go to the gym and I would be like on the treadmill and I'm like, I can run faster than them. And I'm like, they don't even know I'm in a competition with them.
Well, and you know what's so funny that you say this yesterday. So I'm a part. I'm a part of multiple things. Like I always believe in having mentors in different ways, and I have group coaching programs I'm in. Like I'm all over. I have one-to-one coaches. I've got all different kinds of
Yeah.
stuff, right? And I think every month I pay for 5 different memberships in some places of my world, like
Yeah.
astrology, spirituality, sexual expression, self-expression, this group coaching asset, that like
Yeah.
wealth and body. Like I have all these things, right?
All the
So I'm
things.
just like, okay. So yesterday, our coach in this group coaching program, every week he talks in a different facet. There's 4 facets every month he talks to. Yesterday was power, which means the body, the movement, the strength of the body. And he gave us a challenge to run a mile and whatever clock over the next 3 days. So we have 3 days to do it till tomorrow to get our mile, like whatever our mile time is. And then for the next 30 days is to work within that to beat the time and do better. And
Oh
so
my
the whole
God.
strategy like dropped into my mind about how I was going to do that, but it's me against me, right? So it's like, and the
Yeah.
percentage of the work. So he says to you, don't be that guy that's lugging it on the machine and like not going full on in, for your first time, and then all of a sudden you carve off 10 minutes because you were fucking around the first time,
Don't
right?
try to finagle the system. Yeah.
Yeah, you go all in. You go all in and you be in your integrity and all in. So I'm doing my
Oh
mile
yeah.
today when I get to the gym, like after I do my back workout. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to get my mile in. Let's see where I'm at. I'm not a runner. I don't do cardio. Like I do some hit stuff somewhere through, but I'm not a so I'm like, fuck, I don't know where I'm going to be, but it doesn't matter. It's now 30 days of me against me. How do I train in this? How do I integrate this in? How do I move it forward? And this is the key for all of it. How are we showing up this way in our lives all the time? Like, how are we moving this needle?
Whoa, yes. And the deep, there's so many deep things that you could go into,
Yeah.
but it's about commitment.
Yeah.
It's committed. Where are you committed and where are you half-ass committed?
Yeah. And where are you
Right?
going to
Like,
push yourself to the edge? Like, I'm going to go on that fucking treadmill and be done after I'm done.
but
Like, I
the
guarantee you.
interesting thing is like the way you show up one way is usually the way you show up every way. And so
Yes.
like the commitment aspect for me is like I'm committed and I'm committed every day. Like
Yeah.
I'm in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. So it's like I like the protocol downloaded, like everything I do is downloaded, right? I'm like, what do I need to do in order to make this work? They're like, you need to run 3 miles twice a week and then do 1 mile on 3 other days. So 5 days of this running that comes at the end of my weight training, my normal weight training workouts. And I'm like, okay, I can hold this because that'll help my body get rhythmed so that I can move through. He's giving away $1,000 to the person who has the highest percentage of growth. So
Okay.
you know that you have to commit into this and there's a deadline and you got to follow the rules or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I'm like,
Oh yeah.
I'm going to go all in. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know I'm going to be a different person coming out of this. Like,
Oh,
and
100%.
that's the thing, right? So I love that we brought this around to this conversation and we're
I
going to end on
know,
this.
so good. So good. I feel
Yeah.
like we could talk all day, but
We can talk all day, and I love that you're in my life, and I love
I
that we're
know.
connected, and I'm really grateful, Kathleen, for the message you brought
Oh,
forth and for your
thank
spirit and
you.
the work you're doing and the energy of almost like the silent giant, but not like you're in the background still supporting a movement, in the
Yeah.
collective. So I see
Yeah.
you and appreciate you. So I just want to say that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love that we are connected too, and I
Yeah.
know that we will be seeing more of each other.
We definitely will. And if I ever decide to come to Oklahoma for a random reason, guess who I'm calling? You. Yeah, I
Woohoo! Yeah,
know.
I'll show you around.
Yeah, I will drop into my Oklahoma for this experience. Hold space there. It's so
Oh,
funny.
I love
If
it.
people want to reach you, we'll have all the contact details
Okay, yeah,
in the show
for
notes.
sure. Just reach out. I'd love to talk to whoever.
Yeah, in the mechanism of that. And I know also too you're out there spreading the word inside of this movement. So if someone feels inclined and they have their own podcast, you're down to have conversations to
Oh,
see if you can align
absolutely.
stuff.
I'm everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally reaching out. Because that's the thing I've learned in the last is like unless you put yourself out there,
Yeah.
nobody's going to hear about this. And so you constantly have to talk about it. Even no matter what you're committed to. Like keep talking about it.
Yeah, and keep moving it through. So
Yeah.
so grateful. Yeah, we will obviously stay connected. And guys, go give
Okay.
Kathleen a follow, go, interact with her and step into the space. And we'll see you guys all soon. Thanks again, Kathleen.
Mhm.
Well, if that didn't bring up some questions in your field, I don't know what will. So just such a beautiful experience. And I'm so grateful that we got to kind of land the plane in this you versus you energy and you really stepping in to be in competition only with yourself. How are you elevating your life? How are you moving through your life? How are you moving with the pulse point and making decisions based in your light instead of conforming to the infrastructures that the government, political systems, that all of these attunements are trying to get you into play in? And a lot of us didn't even know this existed. A lot of us didn't even know that these systems were being controlled by the government. A lot of us didn't even know about the small minutia on either side that are leading the pathway in this movement, battling against each other to create distortion so the middle people can't even be heard. And maybe you didn't even gather that from that conversation, but that's what I took out of it. So I'm going to urge you to follow Kathleen, reach out to her if you feel called to that. If you felt any juiciness moving through this podcast, snap a photo of it, tag us on Instagram, help spread the word, send it to a friend, send it to an educator send it to a colleague. Maybe someone's stressed out and no longer enjoying the work that they do in life. Maybe this will help support them. Remember, everybody, this is a movement of light, and we get to step in and we get to move it through and we get to make a choice today and every single day how this plays out. Are you going to let someone else control your mechanism and control your life? Or are you going to take a hold of it, pull it by the reins, no matter how fucking hard it is, and start to take some action? I'm going to leave you with that thought today. I'm just grateful that you guys are here, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.